As promised, I wanted to give you a quick update about the Jupiter and Saturn square that's happening on June 15th. We started to feel this square pretty intensely in the lead up to the Sagittarius full moon. And even late last week, I had teased that there would be a falling out between Trump and Musk, but I didn't realize it was going to be such a public meltdown in the lead up to the Jupiter ingress into Cancer. And I also was a bit surprised by the fated event that seems to be the Gavin Trump showdown about sending the National Guard and the military into California, despite the governor not requesting them nor needing them. It was an overexertion of power on Trump's part. And so I'm sure we'll start to see more fallout from that decision. But yeah, things are starting to heat up pretty intensely. And of course, the Mars square Uranus is not helping anything. That is definitely adding a lot of violent tension in the air. So holding my breath, I'm hoping things don't get worse as we move into the actual square in the military parade that's happening in Washington over the weekend. Now, I don't know about you, but I've had my own personal drama that's been happening over the past week. I had skin cancer surgery on my nose. If you didn't notice, I have this big sore on my nose. And if you didn't know, Jupiter symbolizes the nose and Saturn symbolizes Cancer. And I realized this as I was waiting for my biopsy, and Saturn had conjunct my Jupiter, which is elevated in Pisces, but in combination with Saturn, the results aren't so rosy. And then 2 days after, on Friday, after this surgery, I tripped and fell and hurt my elbows, cut up my elbows and my knees while I was escorting my son's school trip. And last but not least, my son and my husband were traveling to Portland for a basketball game, and our car got broken into, and they stole some things out of our car, a gift that we had bought my son for Christmas, his two only Christmas gifts. So it's been quite dramatic couple of weeks, and I'm hoping things start to chill after this weekend, but we will see. I'd love to hear what's been happening with you. Please leave me a comment below. And if you like these videos, I'd appreciate a like and a comment. It helps the algorithm, find the people that are interested in the nerdy astrological content that I'm most interested in. So let's look at a couple of the charts. Now, before we view the current chart, I want to take a moment to review the past Jupiter-Saturn square cycle, which happened during our president's first nomination in 2016. During that nomination, we had 3 cycles converging, similar to what we are seeing now. We had Neptune on the south node in Pisces, and Jupiter on the north node in Virgo, with Saturn creating a T-square with both nodal configurations. And it's quite amazing when you look at the 2 conjunctions, the one in 2000 and the one in 2020 that started each cycle. If you look at them on a biwheel, you'll see the convergence of the cycle here. And you'll also see that the North Node conjuncts Mars very near the president's own North Node, which was also on the IC of the previous chart. It speaks to this tribal leadership war that is breaking up the very foundations our country was founded upon. You can see the dissolving with the Saturn-Neptune transit that is happening very near the nadir, or the IC of the Sibley chart. Now, this current chart I'm showing you is the Saturn ingress into Aries before the final Jupiter-Saturn square as Jupiter enters Cancer. You see that Saturn has now joined Neptune and Jupiter is on the other side, creating a grand cross with the previous T-square configuration. We're now feeling a new type of tension. In 2016, Saturn in Sagittarius put a damper on our most adventurous impulses between a very practically minded approach to growth based in discernment, and our most idealized fantasies for the future. Now the nodes are in opposite signs, and the tension that has been building is one that hasn't let go of those old fantasies. It's now seeking fresh and bountiful growth based on the seed it planted last cycle. A seed that has sprouted into a tribal fervor for security and a desire to dissolve old power structures as we prepare to start a new collective karmic cycle. This month, Saturn flirts with Neptune at the beginning of Aries before Neptune purifies Saturn and officially begins its new cycle next year. When Jupiter and Neptune met up in 2022, it was within a degree of an opposition to the United States natal Neptune at 22 degrees Virgo. This was the same year Musk bought Twitter during his Chiron return. The South Node at this degree symbolizes a lion tamer displaying his skills and character or overcoming pride and self-love. The North Node at 22 degrees Pisces, a materializing medium giving a seance. James Burgess goes on to write, "In the new age, there are many hopeful people yearning for a new way forward and ready to grasp at straws, believing in absurdities and trusting their untested intuition to an unrealistic degree." Neptune often parlays as a dreamy, idealistic vision, nostalgia for the past, mirages on the road ahead, all forms of deception, misdirection, and sleights of hand. When Jupiter and Neptune meet up, it can easily blind us, turning our fantasies into delusions. We can become reckless and embody a blind faith that can easily come crashing down once the high is over. Saturn, on the other hand, demands discipline, a structure for our dreams. When these three planets meet in aspect, we can experience an operatic tug of war between our ideals and fantasies versus pragmatic reality. We might feel Saturn's pressure and even see our fantasy falling apart right in front of our eyes, but we can desperately cling to that fantasy until reality comes crashing down around us. In 2015, in the tug of war between the polarities of Jupiter versus Neptune, Saturn was the counterweight, demanding balance. Now Saturn and Neptune join, and it's Jupiter adding tension to the unlikely pair, attempting to breathe life into merging a collective fantasy with reality, or attempting to give birth to a revolution in order to impregnate our current apocalyptic reality with the seeds of something more life-sustaining. But just as quickly as Saturn gives form to our fantasies, Neptune can dissolve those forms. It's like a Rorschach test that can morph into different pictures, depending on who looks at it. You can see that playing out in real time with the sudden unraveling and then reconciliation of the Trump-Musk alliance prior to the Jupiter and Cancer ingress. The sudden spat exposed the fragile balance of Trump's coalition of Silicon Valley reactionaries, white nationalists, and misogynist podcasters. Musk, whose money and power adds fuel to this coalition, has this tug-of-war signature in his own natal chart, a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction opposing Saturn. That's why these cycles are so important in his life. He can easily swing from extremes of grandiose idealism to harsh reality once he gets out of balance. When Uranus enters Gemini, it will conjunct his Saturn, activating this opposition, which could certainly bring him back to reality with an unpleasant jolt. Then we have the various trade and immigration wars impacting our financial and physical security. The authoritarian fantasies, with its lessons about the abuse of power and the limitations of force. These have all started to play out amidst the backdrop of AI's support, amplifying the power of the police state. Our National Guard and military called to assert power over California's state sovereignty, making the recent ICE protests 10 times worse. Waymos, self-driving cars being set on fire, while VCs muse about the future of empowering cars with guns to fight back. Companies became people. Why not cars and robots too? I wonder if the technologists thought about how this could impact them or their own businesses once they realize they can't control these power mechanisms they've helped put into place. Kind of like what's happening to Musk right now. People have been attributing the recent development of AI to Pluto in Aquarius, but it's also Saturn and Neptune's joint journey through Pisces, the fantasy attempting to take form. In the startup world, the buzz around the announcement of generative AI was what you would call faking it until you make it. More Jupiter and Neptune than Saturn. Go big or go home. If you can tease the dream long enough, you can sometimes meet expectations with reality. As both planets morph into Aries, incubating for a year before the exact conjunction, our fantasies may slowly give birth to new life. And it might take shape into something we didn't foresee, for good or for bad. It may be just the beginning of a much bigger incubation, leading to what Ra-Uruhu prophesied as a new species born in 2027, making the unreal real. We've seen some amazing developments of AI video and photography, at least breathing new life into disparate fragments of reality. These developments are simply the lowest hanging fruit, planting the seeds for this next cycle. It's not much different than the fantasies we've built up around us over the last century, the mechanisms eventually abused to attempt to hijack our minds. But it makes these control mechanisms much more accessible with less effort. With less effort required, will it expand our consciousness in a way that becomes fruitful? Or will it spiral us into a world that further denies the reality of our destructive and consumptive impulses? Because the Pope features in this chart with the Moon-Pluto signature, I'll draw the comparison of the mythology of Jesus, the real man, versus Christ, the resurrected mythology. It's a replication of the disparate mythologies, personal transmissions, eyewitness accounts, first passed down verbally and then eventually written down in various volumes. The Bible is simply a collection of these texts, a recording of both the material and the mythological, morphing into a multitude of translations and interpretations over the years. What is material real versus mythological, and does it even matter? The resurrection of Christ has not been proven, and it is debatable whether the resurrection was even meant to be interpreted literally. The resurrection as a symbolic rite of passage available to anyone is lost on most people. It has certainly been taught as something that literally happened, and that mythology has been kept alive over the centuries. This mythology has gone through its own cycles of distortion, manipulation, and abuse. It once had its own battle with very similar tactics of secular media that's playing out now. And in the past, it attempted to compete with secular media. And now it hopes to become central once again by merging powers with the current media landscape. But how many versions can you make mixing originals? How many copies until your copies start to devolve, a distorted shell of the original? How far can our fantasies take us? How long will it take us before we wake up to the manipulative powers that motivate us from century to century? You see Chiron in this chart at 24 degrees Pisces, with the North Node now at that degree. The Sabian degree is a religious organization succeeds in overcoming the corrupting influences of perverted practices and materialized ideals. Both our president and China's leader have their sons in the Human Design Gate 12, line 1, labeled the monk. They both came into power within a few years of each other. The details about what brought China and the US to this juncture don't matter as much as this. The broader implications of the corrupting influence of authoritarianism feeding materialism is playing out in its most extreme caricature on the world stage. Cheap capitalistic consumerism is unsustainable at our current trajectory. The 200-year Earth cycle has now expired. The snake is now rapidly feasting on its head and will eventually succeed in shedding its old skin. It will certainly end material consumption as we know it, but will what takes its place be even more destructive? Capitalistic structures started before our country's founding, but we fueled its growth with our abundant access to resources. We started shifting toward technology during the first air cycle in the 80s, but this initial shift only fueled our consumptive power as we continued with the Earth cycle. Now we see the end is near, and yet technology is still reliant on Earth minerals that have become less and less available. So a technology revolution also needs to take place. We need to break free from our dependence on the rapid consumption of our Earth's resources. When you look at the chain of dispositors, you cannot describe the change in this chart more perfectly than Mars at the last degree of Leo in the first house, just past a square to Uranus in the 10th house. By modern rulership, Venus becomes the final dispositor in this chart. It sits in the 9th house with the Sabian symbol, a Red Cross nurse, speaking of compassionate service. If you watched my Saturn North Node video, you'll remember that the evolutionary journey of the United States includes leadership through service. The U.S. Constitution was formed in exact opposition to this type of king's rulership we see playing out before us. It is through servant leadership that one is entrusted to lead the collective. Saturn in Libra demands a fair and equitable approach. But we're certainly going to be challenged here as Saturn makes its own opposition to the US's natal Saturn. Will we survive this time? Well, we've survived worse. Remember, the United States just experienced its Chiron return, which speaks to gaining strength through adversity. Humbling lessons can be hard won. I am buoyed a bit by the Pluto moon signature in this chart and the Pope's planned mass at a Chicago stadium the very same day the president will have his military parade. The mass is about the Trinity, and it reminds me of the three equal branches of our government. The moon at 14 degrees Aquarius is labeled two lovebirds sitting on a fence and singing happily. It's about the practice of happiness. Happiness isn't a destination that you've reached after you've attained a certain goal. It isn't something you achieve after you become the most rich or the most powerful. God knows we've all witnessed how miserable many of these people seem to be. It's simply a practice. And the spiritual masters teach that it is possible to practice even amidst the worst possible outer circumstances. Am I ready for that practice? I don't think I've reached anything near that kind of test, but it's something I keep in my mind every single day now. Making America great with tariffs is a form of Neptune nostalgia, wishing to return to what some consider the heydays of a rising empire. Geminis can certainly spin a good Neptunian fantasy, especially when they have an out-of-bounds Mercury in aspect to their own natal Neptune. But if the word does not inspire concrete action, it can just as quickly dissipate as soon as it takes form. Since Saturn and Neptune will be dancing back and forth between Pisces and Aries for the rest of the year, we will likely see multiple manifestations of these types of red lines drawn only to dissipate as soon as they come to form. It's something to keep in mind as our own minds are going crazy with fear about what's happening to our country. Remember, we have the power to create our own visions for the future. And we have the rest of the year to keep our heads up and our visions alive with the future we want to see. Through our own actions, we can help form this future in our own communities, with our own loved ones. That's it for me. I hope this video helped in some way, and I'm praying for everybody that we get through this rough period. I'll see you next time.